training tonight, and I thought I would just put out a quick video to talk about something I've been thinking a little bit about. It's come up in a couple conversations. We've talked about it in class. And I was talking with a friend of mine who's a teacher up in the northwest United States. We were talking about the difference between large frame and small frame fighting styles and how they work against some of the contemporary striking strategies that's being demonstrated in MMA and boxing these days. Things have evolved a lot over the last several hundred years of fighting. And so in your Xingyi and your Bagua and your Tai Chi fighting arts, a lot of times you see these large frame stance postures, large frame movements, and you wonder how these wide open stances will fare against somebody who's got a tight guard for boxing or other such similar sports and fighting arts. And so when somebody asked me about that once, I pointed out that, yeah, the forms are done in kind of a large frame, but they're not intended to necessarily fight in that scaled frame in all phases of combat, in the sense of in all ranges of combat. And so we think of it more like, at what distance am I from my opponent when I'm holding that stance? And then how does the stance change as the distance between my opponent and myself changes? So let's say I'm in a guard position, we're going to take a Xingyi stance of San Ti, but this would apply to Bagua or Tai Chi as well, I think, in my thinking anyway. Other teachers may disagree with me, and that's fine. So I'm in a San Ti position. At this distance, I would think I'm a fair distance away from my opponent. Maybe if you look at my Bob here, my personal training partner, I'm going to be at least this far away. Something that I would have to, I can't hit him without stepping. I can't hit him with just a single front step. Like a half step forward is not going to get me in striking range. So this distance gives me something both an obstacle as well as a tool I can use in my favor, and that's time. The distance it takes to cover that, the time it takes to cover that distance gives me an advantage. I can see the person coming, I have more time to react because he has to cover more distance. Now that's the advantage for me, but it's also the disadvantage if I'm the one who's attacking. So it's an advantage defensively, but it's a disadvantage offensively. So I'm in my San Ti stance, ready to go, and when he comes at me, I can intercept him early and then use that to my advantage as I come in. Or defensively, depending on what strategy I'm using, like a counter-striking type of method. But at this range, I'm going to use a larger frame here because I want to intercept him early. I also want him to have a false sense of distance. So I'm going to put my arm out there and kind of make him feel like he's closer to me than he really is. And I can use that in different ways strategically when I'm fighting. But as my opponent gets closer to me, the scale, this full open frame that I'm using, which has a lot of benefits from a health perspective, a body awareness, training perspective, learning to teach things like structure and whatnot in form training and in practice, starts to shrink a little bit. This gap between my elbows and my ribs starts to get smaller. So now this large frame San Ti, as my opponent gets closer, becomes more like this. It's your medium range. Now from here I can hit him with just a single step, half step forward. I'm in this middle range. Okay? And from here, now I don't have as much distance between him and me, which means I don't have as much time to defend. So I have to make a tighter guard. So I have as much distance to move to defend myself here. I'm kind of closing up some of those windows. So you have a big guard here, there's a big window here. This hand has to come all the way over here to intersect something coming from this direction. if he throws a hook or a roundhouse. But I can get away with that because I have more time, because he has more distance that he has to traverse to get to me. Okay, as that distance shortens, my time component goes away a little bit. So I have to tighten up my guard, be a little bit more defensive. My bottom hand comes up a little bit, elbows come closer to the ribs a little bit, this lead hand comes in a little bit, shoring up this window here that my opponent could attack me with. This hand can get up to block just a little faster, cross just a little faster. And then as I get even closer to my opponent, now I don't have to step to hit at all. This comes even closer. So now here's my guard. Here's my San T position when I'm this close to my opponent. Notice the similarity that you see to a lot of more contemporary guard positions. My hand comes up even further, elbows come in even closer. Now I'm almost hugging my ribs with my elbows. Really tight. My body shrinks in just a little bit, kind of going into what we call a monkey back posture, just a little bit. And this hand comes even closer. It's almost right above my elbow. If it isn't, sometimes it is right above my elbow. So now this window over here, that's an opportunity for my opponent to hit me with like a hook or something coming from the side, is even smaller, and get the hand in there to block or out to block, however which way I want to do it. Across here to defend, up here, down. I can block those things a lot easier. As you get closer, the likelihood that he's going to attack with his hands to the lower body diminishes. Because hopefully you're coming at his head just like he is to yours. So on your body, plus if the hands drop this close to the body, you've got other things you can use to close the gap and defend with. It's a little bit less likely. Also, the likelihood that he's going to kick you low, it goes down a little bit. It's not gone, it's just diminished. When you're at this range, you're primed for kicking. Somebody comes in, you kick him in the knee, you kick him in the groin, you attack low. But as you're here, kicking low is a lot less likely. It's more knees and whatnot. And there are a lot of other different strategies that you can use to defend low, using your lower body and distance for jamming techniques that you can use. So kind of when you're thinking about this and you're looking at postures and forms, and you're trying to figure out the combat efficacy or relevance to those postures, think about them in the context not only of their training conditioning perspectives, such as what can they be teaching about body awareness, balance, strength and conditioning, flexibility, mobility, but also what principles are they teaching you about proper position and posture for different things. Santi is a great posture for fighting because it adheres to basic principles that make a good guard stance. Okay, a good posture. A, the hands are out in front, ready to be used. B, the hands are together on the center line as your body is slightly bladed. Not fully bladed, because that takes this side of the body out of the picture too much. It takes too much time to get it back into play. But just like 45. So you've minimized your body position, kind of optimizing it for both hands, while at the same time optimizing it for less target awareness. Which, when your body is at 45, it makes it easier for you to utilize rotating strategies of the torso, which helps to protect and evade and minimize shots that you do take, as well as power production. But also, the hands demonstrate a high hand and a low hand, a lead hand and a guard hand. And these are basic principles of guard positions, guard postures, stances, fighting postures. You're going to notice that a lot of your fighting postures, with a few exceptions, like the peekaboo stance of boxing, but even that, if the body's bladed properly, you have a lead hand and a guard hand. You just don't have a high hand and a low hand. But most of your fighting postures have a high hand and a low hand. What that does is that positions one hand ready to attack or defend high, and the other hand ready to attack or defend low. So the less you worry about defending the lower body, the higher that hand gets. And you'll notice that traditionally, even in boxing, if you look back boxing a long time ago, their stances were more out here and more here because rules didn't exist in boxing as a sport. The further you go back, there are fewer rules. And so 400 years ago, boxers gouged eyes and bit and they clawed and they hit the groin and they kicked and they picked people up and threw them down. So, you know, they were attacking the lower body as much as they were attacking the upper body, so you had a hand down here to protect a little bit more. So this is the kind of the thought process between Santi and fighting and how you scale it for the range. Obviously, if I'm this close to my opponent, my hands are probably busy doing something. But if they're not, they're definitely not out here. Because, well, obvious. So your hands get closer, your stance and body tightness gets here, so that when you engage a hand, you can begin doing, you know, your sanso contact control tactics, or striking. However you like to throw your hands out in combinations for striking. So, but then as you get further away, it doesn't serve you any purpose to have this tight guard here when your opponent's that far away. You don't need to protect so much. You know, you can. There's nothing wrong with having a tighter guard all the time, but you can afford to relax and reach out a little bit more, intercept a little earlier, and that's what this gives you when you then reach out. This gives you that opportunity to intercept your opponent a little earlier as he's coming in, which gives you some more freedom to move a little bit more, a little sooner, and that gives you opportunity to tie up their arms and do other things like throws and locking techniques, sweeps, takedowns, and those kinds of things. And because you're engaging your opponent earlier, tying up their arms before you get to working your way in. So, there you go. That's my thought process. Then we'll practice with Victor Bob here.